honor to introduce our speaker today. So my name is Dennis Sylvester. I'm the interim chair for ECE, and it's Wallace today. Rick is the 2023 ECE Alumni Merit Award winner. This is the highest award that we give to our alumni. Rick earned his bachelor's degree here in electrical engineering and then his master's degree in engineering management from Santa Clara University. And then he went on to hold positions at a couple companies, Ultratech Stepper and Cypress Semiconductor, which some of you may have heard of, before joining KLA in 1988. So since 2005, he's been the president and CEO there at KLA. And KLA is an amazing semiconductor company, always exceeding expectations, and I think a lot more people know about it today than even 5 years ago. They're a Fortune 500 company. They're working on shaping the future of everything from AI to next-gen chip design. Last week, they were named one of the world's best companies by Time magazine. They've also been recognized by Newsweek as being one of the greenest companies. And so congratulations to you, Rick, for your leadership on those and many other achievements. And more locally, we're really happy that KLA decided to make their second headquarters here in Ann Arbor a few years ago. It's a really amazing building that you should check out. So Rick, we're really happy to have you here. And he's got no slides, so you know he can do that. Well, thank you all
for coming out on. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming out on a Friday afternoon. I wanted to just do some storytelling, a little bit about my observations. I had somebody last week, I met with an investor earlier this week, and they said, "You've been in this industry for decades." I was like, "Ooh, yeah, I guess I have." What thoughts do you have about it, and what do you think the future looks like? So I'm not going to talk so much about that, but I am going to talk about some of the learning that I've had over that time period, and some thoughts on maybe I get a lot of conversations, discussions with students or people that are new to their career on how to think about their career management. So I want to share some thoughts on that. First of all, I want to explain why I chose electrical engineering. So when I remember being 6 years old and saying I wanted to be an electrical engineer. And of course, I had no idea what an electrical engineer was when I was 6. But I had a grandfather who was an electrical engineer, and he was kind of my role model. And so I thought I wanted to do that. But then when I was 9, I wanted to be a baseball player, and when I was 11, I wanted to be a rock star. So I kind of went through the cycle, but I came back to engineering. And I chose in specific electrical engineering because in high school, even before that, I was playing with engineering stuff. I was a ham radio operator. I worked on building my own computer back when that was a thing. And I was heavily kind of in that world of building my own stuff. And in my high school, they really didn't know what to do with me. They didn't have the ability. So I went and they let me do my own class, which, thinking about it now, I just played with more engineering stuff, but I knew I wanted to be electrical. And I looked around the world and I didn't know where I was going to go for electrical engineering. So I checked out schools, and back then, those of you remember, there was a big book and it gave you all the details on all the schools. And I discovered University of Michigan. And I was in Ohio, and so it's not that far away. And the electrical engineering department was very highly regarded. And it was a big school, and I was in a small town at a small school, and I thought I want to go to some place where I can learn. And when I came up for this was rolling admissions time, right? So I came up in November, and it was raining, it was cold, it was big, and it was wet, and I was like, perfect. This is where I want to go. And I have kids who have been through the college application process. I applied to one school. I mean, I basically picked Michigan, applied, got in, and I didn't think a lot about it. And so that's why I picked Michigan. The last thing I'm going to talk about is why I picked Bursley. I did not. And at that time, engineering, those of you remember, was East and West Engineering on main campus. And I got the housing assignment. Of course, it came in a package, and I opened it up. And I thought, oh my God, they hate me. And I'm pretty sure it's because I was from Ohio. And so I lived in Bursley, and I did that for 2 years. I went to Central Campus and eventually moved down there. And I have to say, engineering school for me was difficult. It was really hard. I had to work hard. I was tempted at one point. I took an introduction to philosophy class in Angel Hall, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's no problem sets. You just say what you think. I got good feedback. This is great. And the TA said, have you thought about majoring in philosophy? And I said, well, and then going to law school. And I said, oh, that sounds really good. But I didn't. And I chose electrical engineering, and I'll get to this partly because I thought it was hard. Partly because I thought it was going to be difficult for me to do, and I thought it was important, even at that age, to do things that were difficult. And I'll talk more about that. When I got out of school, I took a job with Procter & Gamble in northern Michigan, and it was a paper factory. I was a controls engineer, and I took that job because I had reasons why I wanted to stay in the state and all that, but I got up there, and after a couple years, I realized I should not be there. I should be in Silicon Valley. I literally didn't know where Silicon Valley was. I just knew that there was a Silicon Valley, and at that time, I bought the San Jose Mercury News, and there were a bunch of want ads, and I sent out resumes to all these companies that were hiring. And in one summer, I'd been there a couple years, I got 100 rejections out of 100. And so I'm 24 years old, and my conclusion is, gee, I need to go there. And so I sold everything I had. I drove my Camaro T-top out to California. And before I did that, I flew out there. I stayed with a friend of a friend on a couch. I got an interview opportunity with a startup company in the semiconductor industry, which I didn't know what the semiconductor industry was, but I had a photography background. Those of you who know who TJ Rogers is, he was the CEO, and Cypress was still a startup. It was pre-public. So I got this opportunity. I interviewed with TJ. He's the last interview. And really, they were just hiring me because I could warm a mirror. I mean, it was weekend work. They just wanted somebody to pick up the slack. And they knew I had photography, so lithography can't be that different. And you can work weekends. And so I was working Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 12 hours a day. But before I got that, I'm having this interview. And I get to TJ, and TJ looks at my resume. He goes, you're a double E from Michigan. I said, yeah. He goes, what the are you doing making diapers? As in Procter & Gamble. And I said, well, that, sir, is why I'm here. And that was my introduction to the semiconductor industry. But there are a couple things about that in terms of, I didn't really know what the semiconductor industry was, and I'll get to the story about getting more education. But I thought it was a startup. I'll work there for a while, I'll learn some things, and then I'll go do some other things. But I was a controls engineer. That's what I studied. And when I was at Procter & Gamble, we were doing control systems. And back then in the 80s, paper plants were fully automated for a lot of the paper management, surprisingly so. And I get to the semiconductor industry, and it's not automated at all. They throw away half of what they make. And so my thought is, boy, there's an opportunity here for somebody in process control in the semiconductor industry. And I became a customer. I'm working in the fab. I became a customer of KLA. But before I did that, as I'm in the fab, I started asking people, how does this stuff work? And nobody knew. They didn't know how the process engineering worked. They just knew they're part of the fab. And that's when I decided that I had to go back to school. Now, mind you, those of you who were here in that time period and you went through the CRISP process, right, of applying for classes, registering for classes, by the time you were a senior, if you dialed it right, your classes started late in the day, right? You worked your way until 11 o'clock, and the engineering management or electrical engineering master's program I got started at 7 a.m., which I thought was quite rude. That was Santa Clara. And they're really smart. They have regular school during the day. They have the engineering management and engineering graduate program in the morning, and they have MBAs in the evening. They sell out that campus. It's pretty impressive.
Utilization.
So I got into that job, and I was at Santa Clara, and what I realized then, even though I had struggled at Michigan in engineering, and I worked really hard to get my degree, I was well equipped, even going back 5 years later. And I realized it was because I had struggled at Michigan, and because I had been through a very rigorous engineering curriculum, that I was able to pick it up and and it was pretty straightforward. And I realized maybe the education at Michigan was more rigorous and difficult than I had first appreciated, because it was hard. I worked hard, and I didn't crush it. But I did well enough that I had an understanding that I could learn more and I could do more. And one of my themes is you're going to have to, in anybody's career, it's all going to happen. You're going to have continuous education. You're going to have to keep being re-educated. You're going to have to keep learning new things, because the things that you learned are not going to be the things that you need. When I joined KLA, I'm going to talk a little bit about KLA for a minute. I joined in 1988 as an apps engineer. Dennis mentioned some of it. We're at 15,000 employees, 600 of whom are a couple miles away. And that's the newest site and the fastest growing site. We're at about $10 billion in sales, and we're about a $70 billion in market cap. So in the Fortune 500 is really about revenue, and we're about 416th out of 500 in revenue. But we're 125th in market cap, and we're 14th in profitability. And so we feel pretty good about those numbers, but of course, I'll get to the story that is, it's always nerve-wracking if you're in my job, because nobody really cares about what you've done, they care about what's coming. So there's not much reason, and you don't really celebrate so much as you worry. When I became the CEO, I was internal, accidental promotion, kind of. Some will dispute that. Like my support team up here, my wife will dispute that. But I kind of felt like I was out of my depth. I wasn't ready for that job. And so one of the things I knew I needed to do when I got in the role is I thought KLA had been successful at the time because of our engineering capability and in spite of our culture. And I felt that there was a huge opportunity to improve our culture and become a better company. And there was a book written by Jim Collins, some of you may know, Good to Great. And Good to Great is a book there where Collins went back and he looked at all these companies that had been successful and enduring success over time. And what he said was, here are the attributes, and by he means over time is like 15-year periods. And so Collins had taught at Stanford, and then he set up shop in Boulder. And he has a consulting business, and the one he gets 200 at that time. He got 200 applications a year from companies, and he would only do 15. And I thought, boy, Jim, there's a pricing opportunity in there, because he had so much demand. But one of the deals is you had to fill out the survey, and you had to explain to him, and the CEO had to attend, and you had to go. And the thing you had to work on was your vision for how do you become a great company, learning what all the companies. In my application, I said, we're a good company, we're not a great company. I want us to become a great company. What is it we need to do? And what is even a great company? Right? What does that mean? And so over time, there's this kind of definition of any organization, what does it mean to be great? And there's kind of three things you need to think about if you want a great organization, whether it's a company, whether it's a university, whether it's a sports team. You have to have superior results in the things that matter, the results that matter. Now, in a company, it's pretty straightforward. It's return on shareholder investment. That's what it is, risk adjusted over time. It's an easy metric to know. It's a hard one to achieve. You have to have that. You also, to be really outstanding, you have to make a distinctive impact. In other words, would you be missed if you disappeared? Like, how do you do it? And it's an interesting thought experiment when you think about different companies. You can get superior results, but do you make a distinctive impact? And then the last one is, do you endure? Does success endure? Like, are you one that goes up and down? And particular Collins' thing was the success of companies over the long term that are successful do not have charismatic leaders. They have systems in place and they have values. And those are the things that propel them, so that it's not about the one person, the one ego. And in fact, he'll argue that the leadership necessary to be successful over the long term is the one challenge for the leader is to curtail his ego. And so I got a lot of help from that from my wife and kids. The exercise that we went through to come up with what are our values still to this day makes sense to me. And I gave a talk at our Ann Arbor facility yesterday. We went out and we looked at what are the things we've done well as a company over the last several years since our inception, and what are the things that we failed at? And what are common, what are the attributes? And what you want in your values you want to understand what kind of people are you going to hire, what kind of people are you going to promote, who are your exemplars. That's the purpose of the values. So we had a set of values when I did this exercise, great place to work, high quality, customer support. And my joke, it was available on values.com. I mean, it was standard generic, but they didn't tell our story. And what our story was number one, the thing we noted, every business we were successful with, every single one, somebody had thought we should shut down and kill somewhere along the line. Somebody in a senior role. And number one value became perseverance. Perseverance is critical because there are no overnight successes in business. There really aren't. The things that you look at that are successful, they take time. And if you want to have a distinctive impact, they take a lot of time and effort. So you need people that have perseverance. And if you don't have perseverance, and this is for all of you, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means, you're going to struggle over time. You have to have perseverance. The second one is you've got to consistently have a drive to be better as a company. No matter what you've done, you can't assume that that's the formula going forward. The world will change, competition will change, technology will change. You have to keep evolving or you die. The third one, it may seem obvious, but it's not, is that you need to have high-performing teams. And I'll get to why that's so important for KLA. It seems like an obvious truism, but following that discovery as a value, we let some senior people go because we recognized they could not be members of high-performing teams because they were too much about themselves. They were too focused on what they got out of it, what they did, than the success of the team. And I guarantee you, for all of you who are entering in careers, whatever you're in, being an effective and contributing team member will always be a critical part of your success. And a lot of what that comes from is the fact that there's almost nothing worth doing that you can do alone. It's always in conjunction with other people. The next one is a kind of weird one for us, but it was called HFC, honest, forthright, and consistent. You need to, and this seems obvious, of course you want people to be honest. That wasn't what it came from. It came from the fact that every program we'd had that had struggled and failed, somebody along the way knew that the program was in trouble, but didn't talk about it. So I'll talk a little more about that. And the last one is aspirational. You want to be indispensable to your customers. That was our goal, is to be indispensable for our customers. Not just something, and the way we know that, and the best feelings I ever had with customer meetings is when they told me we could not have achieved what we achieved without you. We could not have done it without you. And we have that conversation with our suppliers too, those for whom it's true. And in the end, yeah, we want to solve problems and do that, but you want to be a value of service to the people from whom you're getting money, right? So on the perseverance, there's a couple of concepts that I think are really important. One, there are no overnight successes, at least not that I know of. Every program that we had over time struggled, had issues. I was on the introduction of the most important product maybe for several years for the company's history. And the mechanical stage that moved around the wafer, we had to redesign it 5 times. The program was a year late. It took a long time to get it done. When it finally got done, it was tremendously valuable, but it struggled. And we had to persist and we had to persevere. There's this concept of the 20-mile march. Anybody know this 20-mile march? Well, you will. Okay, so the idea is if you're making a journey, a trip, let's say you're hiking across the US, it is far more important to have a measured cadence. Let's say every day you do 20 miles. Then some day do 40, and other days it's cold and it's wet. And those of you know me know I'm very consistent. You keep driving the 20 miles, even if you can do more, so that you can do it the next day. When you're on programs that are difficult, you need to set milestones. You need to set your 20-mile march, and you need to work through those issues and those challenges. And it's the accumulation of those that results in success. But it is a discipline. It is a discipline to just keep moving ahead and focusing on that. There are several examples in perseverance. Personally, I had this, my own was obviously engineering school. I view that as a big perseverance challenge. I mentioned the rejections of all my letters. My conclusion was an interesting one. But the last one is, and Fred knows, Fred's taken me cycling here. I would say cycling is my third example, and I'll tell you why, of perseverance. I started cycling again after, I did it as a kid, and then I started later. In fact, I started when I was in this job, partly as a way to, have something else other than worrying about this job. And I noticed I hated climbing hills. And in California, we got some steep hills. I hated it. It was really hard. So I signed up for the Death Ride, which is 5 mountain climbs. And I did it because it was hard. I really did. I said, it's going to be really hard. My wife asked me, what do you want to do for your 50th birthday? And I said, I want to do the Death Ride. She said, that's all. And I said, no, you don't understand. I have to do all the training for it. And so I had a spreadsheet, of course, with all the days, all the distances, all the amount of vertical, all the tracking so that I can work to my goal. And I've done that throughout my life of having a sense of trying to do things that are difficult because I know ultimately you have to do that. And I think for companies and for all of you, you have to have perseverance, even when things are hard, maybe especially when things are hard. I talked to somebody today, an engineering PhD student here, who said that math was really easy for her and engineering just wasn't that hard. I was thinking, oh, I wonder what that's like. The second value, this drive to be better, it's hard because companies that have been successful often think the reason they're successful is the way they've done things is the cause of their success. And I will argue it's their ability to adapt and continue to do things well and understand what are the things that you need to do. The notion for me is that there's always room for improvement. And when we hire new people, we tell them your job is to make those improvements, is to come in and identify what are the things that we are doing that we could do better. Maybe there's new technology, maybe there's a new way of thinking about it. What are the things that we could evolve? Because if we don't, someone else will, or we won't solve the problems that need to be done. So it's a tough thing, and if you don't have people on your management team that believe that you need to keep evolving, that are not stuck in this is the way we've always done it, and so you have to keep shattering your sense of what works for you and recognize there's something new. You have to try new things, and you have to be open to learning. For every company there are more smart people that don't work for your company than do, right? So how do you learn from them? How do you keep evolving and growing and learning? And it's not easy, especially the biggest risk is to companies who have been successful. And when you look at companies in technology who have been successful and then failed, it's often is they failed to continue to evolve. So our board will tell us, I don't see why you guys don't take any victory laps. We go, because God, there's bad stuff coming. We have to solve these problems. We have to keep moving forward. And by the way, we have to make things better. We have to keep evolving. In my own personal life, I think that when I went to get my graduate degree, part of it was this investment in trying to learn new things, right? And I went, and at first it was a little bit hard, and then I realized I was learning, and then I leveraged that knowledge to do another thing, which I am told is called networking. But I wouldn't have thought of myself as a networker. So I was in Cyprus in the fab, and I realized I don't know enough about how these devices are made, but now I've been to school, I have a little bit of knowledge. So I found the person responsible for integration of the semiconductors, and I spent time with him, with Mark, and I said, explain to me our process. Explain to me how it works. And he was very thoughtful and gave it to me. And why did I do that? Because I wanted to learn more, because I thought I could contribute more if I knew more about what we were doing. Nobody told me to do it. My boss didn't say, go do this. And I had to also share. People don't just take, you got to give some too to other people and make sure that they're learning and benefiting. I noticed when I went to KLA, I did the same thing. I was an apps engineer, and I went and found the optics engineer. And I said, I'm an engineer from Michigan. I can learn anything. Explain to me how the optics works here. Ray trace it for me. I want to understand it. I want to understand more about the system. I went and found the algorithm person, and I said, because at that time KLA does a lot of software, explain to me this algorithm. And then I got an image processing book, and I was reading up because I was trying to understand more about what we did. Nobody was telling me to do that. It was not in my job description. I guarantee for all of you that enter industry, you will not be told to do that. When you ask for their career development plan, it will not include those things. But it's important to do them. As I got more experienced and I had more responsibility, I'd find the finance person and say, explain to me how our financial systems work. How do we, what's it? If you're an engineer, finance is just not that hard. But it's important to understand. It's really important to understand as you grow. And so my thing is, if you're always thinking about how do you learn, how do you contribute more, you do it laterally and you do it vertically. You think about the things that are adjacent to you, how can you learn more about them? And maybe the things that your manager, your boss, your leaders are thinking about. And how do you anticipate that, and how do you continue to invest in and this never ends. This never ends. I mean, today, I was thinking I do books and boards. So I'm reading 2 books almost all the time. One is to get my mind off stuff, and the other is to learn. And the learning stuff will be often biographies. There's a lot of wisdom in the people that have gone before us, and sometimes it's about technology, and sometimes it's about a lot of societal stuff. But it's a reason to keep energizing and learning. When I join boards, outside boards, the reason I join them is, can I learn something? I know I have to be able to contribute to them, but what is it that I can learn? How can I keep learning? So this drive to be better is a corporate value, but it needs to be a personal one. And I don't know any successful leader who doesn't believe that they have to continuously learn new things. You have to continue to do it. You are never done. You might have a degree, but you are not done. And what I'll tell new grads is, we don't hire you for what you know as much as we hire you for your capacity to learn. And what we expect is curiosity, so that you'll continue to learn. The high-performing team thing is obvious, but not. So our systems are very complex now. They got so complex to build them that no one person really understands the whole system. Early on, you could have heroes that knew a lot of stuff, but over time, the complexity and the geographical boundaries became such that it was really important to be able to make sure that people operated as a team. And that seems obvious, but what does it mean? And I'll give you an example. If you're a team leader, there's some clear signs of trouble. If I see a team leader that's taking credit for everything and blaming his team for the stuff that doesn't work. If you're a leader, your inclination should be to give credit and take the blame. Not obvious for people. Not obvious for people. You also praise in public and you give feedback in private, right? Those are kind of obvious things. But there's this idea of trust that keeps coming in. And I learned this, I had this framework established for me years ago about what does trust mean. When you say you don't trust somebody, what does it mean? It kind of goes on 3 axes. One, I don't trust them because they're not competent. I don't trust them because I don't think they're competent. I'm not getting in that car with that kid because I don't think they're competent as a driver. That's one. The second one is they're not reliable. They might be competent, but I don't know. Will they show up? Will they not show up? Can I count on them? And then the third one is motive. Right? What's their motive? And a lot of times we think about the third one, but often it's the first or the second, right? And so this notion of trust, and it kind of cuts both ways, right? It kind of cuts both ways. People aren't going to trust you if you don't trust them, and you have to be able to break down barriers. I want to give 3 examples of my learnings on teams. So I went to Procter & Gamble to be a controls engineer in Sheboygan, Michigan. Any of you been to Sheboygan? Right? Not many. Not many are going to go. But the joke was, it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. That's the. So I went up there and I was going to be a controls engineer, and the guy who was the team manager at P&G, let's call him Brad, got fired like 3 weeks that I was there. And they said, hey, you kid, why don't you be the new manager of these 10 electricians who are in the union? You're 22 years old, the youngest is 38, you should be fine. And so, the first thing as a leader is you go, and I had watched Brad briefly, and he had a pedometer on because he would log like 6 miles a day running around the factory, giving out assignments. He had assignments, and I was like, oh my God. So the first thing of a leader's job is to figure out, what's the job? What's the task? What problem are we trying to solve? What problem? And I realized my problem is I'm a dispatcher. That's my problem. Because I got all these work orders came in from all these people, and me, the 22-year-old kid who knows nothing, is supposed to oversee the work. And I realized I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it because I'm not capable of doing it, and they're going to see through me and chew me up and spit me out, and I'll be like Brad. And so what I did is I said, what's the system I can put in place? And what's the system? And the system was I got a flip chart. And I just wrote all the work orders out on the list of here are all the things that we need to do. And I said to this team who had never been to meetings before, we're going to meet for a half hour every morning. And I said to them, who wants to do what? And they looked at me like I was insane. And I said, look, here's the work. You all know how to do it. You know who's best at doing it. Who wants to do what? And they said, well, you're supposed to tell us. I go, why? Why should I tell you? You're all, I mean, hell, a lot of you have kids. You're responsible. Many of you have jobs on the side. I know you're responsible. I know you're capable. You get paid. I can't, by the way, as a union shop, I can't affect your pay. I can't promote you. I can't fire you, right? So I list all the work and I said, what do you want to do? And I'm like, all right. And so they started taking assignments. And I was like, this is crazy. And then I started going around and meeting them during the day. And I said, how can I help you do what you need to do? And they go, well, you don't know. I said, I don't know anything. What resources can I get you? How can I help you do this job? What is it that you need? And I started getting, well, maybe we could use some help over here. And I'm not really sure, but I think Phil knows how to do this. And so that became my job. And then I did a thing I was really happy with. I did the to-do book. And I put a little book in the area that had all the jobs that hadn't been done. And I said, if you're done early, just, do some stuff out of the book. And they're like, why would we do that? Again, you are being paid. You are adults. That's why you would do that. And they started doing it. They started doing it. They started having pride in getting it done. And one of them told me, you're going to work yourself out of a job. And I was like, yeah. If I do this, I can do other things because you can do that. The reason it worked, and it worked pretty well, was because I'd figured out what the job was, and I had entrusted them to do it, and then I was the resource for them. I wasn't telling them what to do. It turned out, when I left P&G and I went to beautiful Silicon Valley, I thought I'd wasted all that time in Sheboygan, Michigan, and I realized those are the same management tools. They're the same. Right? You want to understand what your job is, you want to facilitate, you want to encourage, and you want to support the people to do it, and you want to allow them to feel good about what they're doing. That is the job. Right? It's not telling them what to do. And the beauty of the P&G thing is, even if I'd wanted to, there was no risk of me telling them what to do. I had no idea how to do what they were doing. Later, I got on a program as a general manager, and I took over this division, and there was this new product that had come out, or was coming out. And I get in the job, and it's 4 times faster than the old product. We quit selling the old product, we're selling the new product, and the new product doesn't work. Like, we can't get it to work. And I go, oh, this is not good. So remembering my days at P&G, I called the guy running it together, and I went and interviewed everyone, and I said, can we do this? Can we get this project done? And he's like, no way in hell, this thing's never happening. Okay, John, what do you need to make it happen? Do you have the team members that you need? Who can you get? And so we went through this whole thing, and we had to redo the schedule but my view is if engineers are generally optimistic, but if they don't believe the schedule to begin with, there's no way you're going to make it. But if they set the schedule and you've given them the resources, at least then they own it, right? So management's idea of telling people to do stuff, my joke is if you tell somebody to run a 5-minute mile and they're an 8-minute miler, they're just going to go, what's the point? But if they're an 8-minute miler and you say, I wonder if you could do 7:45, you might have a shot, right? So with this team, we redid everything, reset the thing, and then they exceeded the plan. And a lot of it was not because I told them what to do, but because I allowed them to tell me what needed to be done. And also, I was on the floor with them. The other part, I was a general manager and I was on the floor, so sometimes you have to lead by example, you have to go in there and you have to help them. This high-performing team thing is not trivial. When I became CEO, part of the point of going to this offsite, because this other job, I wasn't CEO yet, was to get a team that was going to be far more effective than me. And to do that, I had to be willing to let other people own things that I didn't own. And throughout my career, my job is to make the fewest number of decisions that I need to make and rely the most heavily on the people throughout the organization. So at KLA, there's 15,000 people. If I can help them get productivity up a little bit, it's way more than I could ever do. And if I'm making too many decisions or I'm overruling decisions, something's wrong in the system, right? So you got to set up an environment where you're not doing that. This HFC thing is funny because high-performing teams really only work when there's integrity. But HFC came back. I remember I said it was about programs that somebody knew was going to fail, but nobody would acknowledge. And so later you find out, and then it's too late. And the programs that were successful, we had plenty of problems. We just fixed them, right? We got them done. But somebody said something really interesting, and this is, I've thought about this a lot ever since, is that management gets the culture they deserve, right? So if you're the company that shoots people that give you bad news, they're not going to give you bad news. They're going to manage the news, right? They're going to give it to you when it suits them. If you're thinking about how do I message this and manipulate people, it's not going to work. And if you're pretending to know things you don't know, people are going to see through that. And I'll give you a couple of examples. The financial crisis, those of you remember 2009, the world fell apart. It was in 2008, and I went to Taiwan to visit customers. And I came back on a Friday, and I called a management meeting, and I said two things. One, our customers that have money aren't going to spend it, and the ones that need to raise it aren't going to get it. I don't know how bad this is going to get, but it's going to get really bad, really fast. So we need to figure out how we're going to deal with this because it's going to stop. And it did. Our customers stopped. Like we were shipping equipment to some customers and they wouldn't accept it on their dock, stuff they'd already ordered. Everybody just froze. And those of you who remember, is this the next depression? Right? We don't know. So after we rounded up our team and said, okay, we know this is going to be bad. We communicated to the board. I said, this is bad and it's going to get worse than you think. And they go, I don't know. I go, I do. It's bad. And then I got the management team together and we said, okay, you all want to be managers, leaders. Guess when it matters? Now, when things are really bad. Because we don't know. We don't have the answers. But when we talk to the workforce, we're going to tell them we don't know what's happening. We don't know what the future is. Because we don't. And they're going to see through us if we pretend like we do. But here's what we will do. And I did this in the all hands meeting. I said, there's 3 scenarios that we can envision right now. And with them, we have actions that we're going to take, including reduction of headcount. And if we reduce headcount, we're going to take care of people. We have the resources to do it. We're going to treat you fairly. But we will, in order to survive, we may have to reduce our headcount. And I don't know when we're going to know which of those 3 scenarios we're on, but I will tell you when we know. As soon as we get a signal, we're going to tell you what's happening. Because everybody was filling in the blanks anyway, right? They were all busy trying to map out what are we going to do. So it was a lot easier, even though it was hard, to tell them we don't know, but we will tell you when we do. We navigated that one pretty well. The result of it was we earned a lot of goodwill across the workforce and the reputation for they're going to tell us even if we don't want to hear it. So when we talk about HFC, it's not just being honest and integrity. It's being forthright with saying things that they're already thinking, like, look, I was with investors this week and I said, I was preempting meetings. Let's just talk about China. I know you want to talk about China. They're like, what? And I said, yeah, here's what's going on with China. And I think it's important to do that. It's also, I think, if you are consistent with it, you don't have to tell stories later, right? We told you here are the 3 scenarios. It turned out to be kind of the middle scenario. And we did make some adjustments, and then the world got better, a lot faster than people thought. The last example was COVID. So COVID hit our industry in a way that was kind of interesting in the sense that there was a belief that everything could stop, and it was the most dramatic accelerant we've ever seen, but we didn't know it at the time. Right? I had board members asking about cash preservation, and it turned out we couldn't keep up with demand. It just went nuts. But when COVID broke, we had people from KLA that came back from Wuhan at the end of January. From Wuhan. And they came back, and I remember they were taking the temperature at SFO for people coming back, and then the line got long, and so, of course, they just waved everybody through. I wonder why it spread. And so by March, two things happened. One, in California, we went on shutdown in March. And we were going to be on a 3-week shutdown. And so we went through that period, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if it's 3 weeks. So we had Zoom up and running, fortunately. So I had one-on-ones with all the leaders across the company, and I said, how long do you think this is going to last? I think it may be 6 weeks, somebody said. Well, I think it could be a couple months. And I get to this one person, and he says, I think it's 1.5 to 2 years. I'm like, what? He goes, well, remember that thing you told me about reading books? I was reading about the Spanish flu. I think it's 1.5 to 2 years. And I was like, oh, wow. So we got the management team together, and I said, okay, so we don't know how long this is going. What if it's a year or more? What are the things we would wish we had done if we knew now it was going to be a year? This is in April. And I know where we can get the money to do whatever you think we need to do, because nobody's traveling. We're saving a lot of money. For us, it was like $80 million a year. Went to nothing, right? So what are the things we could do if you knew that this was going to last? And how do they support our customers if we do that? And we came up with a couple very specific things. One of them, we used to fly people to fix to install new equipment. And they used to fly from Singapore or the US to go with the system because it was more efficient, because they were well trained. It was a complicated installation, blah, 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 blah. What if they can't? What do we need? Well, we need to train the people in the region. We need some VR technology. We need to invest in the infrastructure around that. We need to figure out how to do remote training. And so we basically said, go. Go. We're going to spend that money. We're going to bet. I'm betting it's not 3 weeks. I'm betting it's not 6 weeks. Then the communication with employees, I said, we need a simple message to people. I need a simple message because everybody's freaking out. So I told them there's 3 priorities for KLA right now. Number 1, we're going to do everything we can to protect you and your family. We're not going to put you at risk. Number 2, we're going to invest in supporting our customers. And number 3, we're going to continue to invest in the long term. Make sure we're continuing to do it. Obviously not as efficiently as before, but we're going to do a bunch of those things, and that's the message. And I did a 5-minute video every week for about a year from my house on my iPhone saying, here's our COVID message to all of you. Here's what's going on. Here's what we've learned. The feedback we got from that and the result is, of course, it took a long time, as you all know. But the changes we made then, see Drive to Be Better, set us up for now, for other periods, because we'd made those investments in the infrastructure, and we were better off as a result. Plus, we'd earned a lot of goodwill. The one other thing I did, and this is the fortune of having been in this job for a while, I said, this is in April. I said, everybody who's in the company right now, you'll be on the payroll till the end of the year, no matter what happens. And initially, the management was like, well, I don't know if we want to say that. And I was like, I've looked at our balance sheet. I know the order's flowing. People are scared. So management's job is partly to alleviate that, because I don't know how much they're going to be able to focus on their job if they're scared about, are they going to get laid off? And they don't have any visibility anymore. They're not coming in. They don't know. And so we sent out the message, so you're going to be on the payroll till the end of the year. We had a crazy boom. I mean, as it turned out, this was an accelerant. And the important thing was that we had done this early, and we had communicated to people so they could put that aside. Right? And so we moved on. So this HFC is more than just telling somebody the way you feel. It's also in how you communicate. The last one is this indispensability part. When the customer tells me we couldn't have done it without you, I said that's one of the highest praises you get. Absolutely. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. Right? If you win enough market and you become leaders in certain markets and they rely on you and there's no near alternative, then it's a huge amount of responsibility to maintain that. Right? So part of the pressure that's on the system is, how do you make sure you keep that? And how do you keep doing that so that you're consistently doing it? But it's certainly a better place than being exchangeable and expendable. right? So the notion of these aspirations. So when people talk about being indispensable, we quickly cut that off inside of KLA and say, no one's indispensable. You're not, I'm not, nobody is. We'll all be replaced one day. The goal is for the organization to produce indispensable results. The goal for the organization is to make a distinctive impact and to create a system which endures long past the people that are there. And so when I think about the legacy, for example, at KLA of our management team now, it's to set them up for continued success. But they too will have to do the things that we've done in terms of looking at how do you continue to drive to be better? How do you continue to evolve and promote? And you all know what a great institution looks like because you're in one. You're in one. I mean, if you think about University of Michigan electrical engineering, started in the late 1800s, so I think you got duration down. 1889, I think. So electrical engineering. Computer came later. 1889. Distinctive impact? Absolutely. Would you be missed? Everywhere, well, except maybe Ohio, but everywhere else. And it's shown that superior results, right? The quality of the research, the quality of the students. And I think part of the success of KLA and that I've been fortunate enough to have has to do with being affiliated with UofM. So with that and for this, I thank you all.
I think we can take a few questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, please jump in. It's a great talk. A lot of it was directed to students. Jay, you're not a student, but go ahead. No, but students should ask because a lot of it was directed toward them. But yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Thanks, that's a fabulous talk.
Thank you.
What kind of thing you wish you could do better? Or put it another way, did you mess up in anything?
Did I mess up in anything?
Anything that you wish you could do better?
I wished I'd learned a language. I wished I'd lived abroad. I wished I'd learned an instrument. Right. So there are several things that I've got many regrets. No, I mean, if I look back and it's there's always reasons why things don't happen, right? But I will look back on those things. Those are I encourage people to take advantage of those kind of opportunities, right? I got asked yesterday if you had a sixth value, what would it be? And I was like, saying no to having more values. That would be my value. Yes.
So I imagine when you have a lot of projects to do, sometimes they success, sometimes they fail, or maybe not so successful.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with those projects that are not so successful? Or in other words, do you try to prevent it before you invest in that project?
Yeah.
Or do you recover after the mistake has been made?
So our hit rate is pretty good, but obviously not perfect, to your point. There's plenty of projects that go longer. And I think one of the keys, you have to think about understanding the failure mechanism and trying to learn from it so you don't repeat it. Sometimes you just take too much risk, and sometimes in our case, we get the market wrong. Like we think if we do this, there'll be this kind of opportunity in the market, and we're wrong, right? Because we're trying things that are new. Other times we just don't execute, and then the question is it the leadership, is it the team that's on there, or is it something? So we do postmortems on programs that fail, and we try to do lessons learned so that we can apply them. But it's really important that those not be viewed as being blaming sessions, right? The other thing we started years ago was the idea of a pre-mortem. I started this years ago. So at the beginning of a program, I said, this thing is 2 years from now, this thing failed. Why did it fail? Right? And list all the things that could go wrong and think about, are we managing the risk? But our hit rate, I mean, almost every program is late. I mean, engineers, as I said, are optimists. And almost every program is late because there's never enough time built in for some of the redesigns and respins. The other thing is we often misunderstand what the actual market requirements are, especially in new areas, right? So we have to focus on that. But back to if you can learn from it, then at least you didn't waste your money on it. And if you don't shoot the people that do it. I mean, we had one program I remember years ago, we just introduced the values and this team came up and said, we're gonna stop this program, it's not gonna work. And we made sure everyone got onto a good assignment after that because we wanted to encourage that, right? We wanted to encourage that. But our system is still not perfect. I mean, obviously there are plenty of programs that we struggle with. The key is to get the ones that matter the most right? Yeah.
If you try hard things, you do difficult tasks, become indispensable, you're taking risks in trying to do really hard things.
Yeah.
How do you manage that risk, especially when one of your values is perseverance? At some point, you either recognize that something will not succeed or you keep trying, right? So how do you balance
Yeah,
that?
so when does perseverance become stubbornness?
Right.
I had a director ask that question, actually, so you should be on our board. When we introduced the values, somebody, and I think it's a great question, and the answer is sometimes we get it wrong, and sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we wait too long, right? Sometimes, and although I'm trying to be supportive of the management team, sometimes I remind them that this program is really stupid. Why are they still supporting it? To the leader, not to the team. But the other thing, and I talked to some of the other members of the executive team, is I've been wrong enough times to not do that, to not stop a program, because I've been wrong about things that I thought would never work that worked. And so part of it is you do, in many cases, have to let it play out. And you have to understand sometimes you're going to miss. But in business, it's like a portfolio of anything. Not everything's going to hit, right? The funniest misses we've had have been where we way underestimated the business. Like it was much bigger than we thought. And I remember a general manager saying, I don't know why people are buying any of this. And then the business took off. And I said, well, maybe we should learn why they're buying, right? But you're right. I mean, sometimes you can go too long. And I think, you know, the old adage is you should pull the pitcher, right? And whatever your analogy is, you should end it before it gets too bad. But sometimes they come around. So sometimes, fortunately, KLA is profitable enough that we can run some of these experiments longer, right? That's part of the thing is we can let them play out and see what happens. But it's a great question, and it's one we're constantly battling. Yeah.
So there are a lot of people graduate from University of Michigan every year.
Yeah.
But only like a few people can become CEO or managers.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure you can stand out from this number of people, and what make you stand out from these people?
I think some of the things, I mean, I did work pretty hard and I was very lucky. I mean, I was in the right place at the right time for a lot of these things that happened. And so I think often if you work hard, this shouldn't be the goal for everybody. Being the CEO should not be the goal for everybody because a lot of people aren't suited to it. Our chief technology officer is definitely not suited to it, and he's had a tremendous career because it's about the things that he is challenged by, and he's a very important partner on the executive team. So I don't think shooting at the CEO job is actually healthy because there aren't that many of them, right? But I think about finding a way where you can contribute, where you can grow in your career and you have satisfaction in what you're doing is far more important than any specific title that you achieve. I mean, because it's very unlikely. The one way you can be sure you're a CEO is do a startup and be the CEO. But the odds on that are pretty tough, right? Other questions?
Well, I'm going to ask you a loaded one.
Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, so you know, I've observed KLA since before you were CEO by a good bit, and you know, so I've seen where that company has gone. You've achieved an environment where people are challenged, but I think generally feel good about being there. Some of your competitors, as I'm sure you extremely well know, have a much more hostile kind of dog-eat-dog kind of environment. I don't know if you want to comment about, you know, kind of. You probably don't want to publicly throw mud on the competition.
No, I do it in private, though. I'm happy to do it in private. No,
if you have any comments about the different management styles, maybe what some of these folks should be looking at when they're looking at early in their careers and.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of very good companies out there. Let's just start with that. There are plenty of very good companies, and we aspire to be like some of them, and some of them I think we've. But for us, for me and the management team, we did heavily focus on culture. And it came from a fundamental belief that people will achieve more in a culture that is not divisive. In a world where you're not feeling terrible every day because you're getting challenged. And I've been in political environments before. So we work hard to do that. But, that can work. I mean, there are plenty of companies, that send things to space that are kind of like that. And the question is, what's the right company for you, right? That you're in. But it's something that we work hard on, and you have to guard against it. And truly, I mean, the values thing might not seem legit, but it is. It is absolutely how we think about promoting people, and whether or not somebody should be on the team is whether they adhere to those values. And in my view, I get asked this question sometimes, how do we make the world a better place? What are you doing to make the world a better place? I got that question a few years ago, and I was like, wait, don't you like your new iPhone? Isn't that enough? So what I said is look, here, and start with the 15,000 people that work at KLA. How about making an environment where they're treated well, they have a chance to promote? Our goal is to promote internally. 85% of our vice presidential appointments are internal promotions, right? We pay people fair, we treat them well. We don't cycle through employees during business cycles. So how about make it better for those 15,000 people, and then for their families? A little bit back, like this COVID thing I said, where we're gonna pay you through the end of the year, is let's just take that off their list, right? And then let's support our customers. That's a broader, if you think about the concentric circles, let's do that. So it's not so much about what the other guys do, it's more about, because I can't control that, it's what we do. And trying to find an environment where people feel like their work matters, and they get rewarded, and they get new challenges. And for a lot of engineers, the great thing about our industry, is if you solve hard problems in the semiconductor industry, you are rewarded with harder problems. Because we're on a cycle. It never ends. The beauty of it is there are so many difficult technical problems to solve. So that's part of the other part of it. But I appreciate that, and we have to keep working on it. Also, you can lose it, right? You can lose a culture, and so we have to make sure we're vigilant.
Well,
Yes.
one more question, Herb.
Yes, so speaking of the semiconductor industry as a whole, how much do you think the CHIPS Act is going to do for it?
We are being recorded, right? Gina, it's great. I told Secretary Raimondo last time I talked to her, I said, thank you for the marketing. Because at least now people know what the semiconductor industry is. So if nothing else, and that it's important and it's fundamental, if nothing else, I think it's helped the awareness. I think it'll help in some pockets. I mean, I told her what I believed was the most important thing we did was get TSMC and Samsung to commit to doing factories in the US. I think that's important because there's a supply chain resiliency. I think that there's some other projects that may or may not pan out, but from the government standpoint, it's more about the overall awareness, and some of these investments are going to work and some don't. You may know that KLA is involved in a CHIP Act proposal with the University of Michigan and the state of Michigan, Washtenaw Community College, and IMEC toward automotive semiconductors. So I think that would be a really good place for the CHIPS Act money to go.
On the record.
Anything else? Yes.
One thing you talked about was when you're in an organization, it's important to kind of expand your purview and learn about areas adjacent to your area. But you said you should make sure you give back so that it's fair, basically. Can you expand on what you mean by that? What's an example of how you could do that?
Well, so when I was working with the person who was explaining the optics, I was explaining how the applications were used, how this system is being used, what people are doing with it, and how they're set. And that was very trade-off of, what they're doing, actually. Here's the settings. They're not even using these other functions because they don't do that. So it's a way to give feedback that's independent so that person, who in general wants to learn more about what they're doing, right, can do that. When it's talking about people at a business level, it's help sharing insights about the business or about what's going on. So I just think that the people that are willing to give information, often it's helpful, and it's not always the case that they need it, but it's helpful if you can to help them understand more about what they're doing too, if they're so interested. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, I think we can wrap up then. Let's thank Rick for a great talk again.
Thank you all.